Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're staring straight into the abyss of the UK's economic reality almost a decade after the referendum. The subject is painful, but the facts are necessary. Britain is definitely falling behind in trade and growth. And my personal view is that this isn't just a tough economic cycle, this is the slow, grueling, and utterly predictable consequence of a structural political choice that reversed the normal course of economic history. And it's not a sudden crash, it's a slow, deliberate economic bleed-out that is eroding the nation's prosperity and its standing in the world, leaving behind a profound legacy of stagnation. The data, now almost 10 years deep, makes a compelling case for national regret. A new report from the Decision Maker panel, compiling both macro and micro level data through early 2025, provides the kind of long-term perspective that the political class tries to desperately ignore. And the conclusion is devastating. The UK economy is estimated to be 6 to 8% smaller than it would have been had the country not left the EU. And let me repeat that. I mentioned that in earlier videos, but still, this is an important part. 6 to 8%. That isn't a small margin. That is a monumental self-inflicted wound that translates into billions in lost revenue, lost opportunity, and a drastically lower standard of living for millions. And you will ask, why is he talking about that again? Because it's once again another group, so to speak, confirming the reports from somewhere else that I reported on earlier. And so we are getting the same numbers here. And this economic failure isn't abstract, it has a clear mechanical cause. The researchers described the decision to leave the EU as a kind of reverse trade reform, where instead of reducing barriers, the UK purposefully raised them. And this created an era of prolonged political and commercial volatility that simply froze the engines of growth. Instead of investing and hiring new staff, businesses spend years waiting for the next announcement, the next changing customs rules, or the next political drama. Investment plans were put on ice across the country, and managerial time was tragically spent on risk assessment and Brexit preparation instead of developing new products or expanding operations. And the cost of this wasted time and lost confidence is calculable. Investment is lower by 12 to 18%. Employment is lower by 3 to 4%, and productivity is also lower by 3 to 4%. And these are the foundational metrics of any successful economy, and every single one is weaker because of the choice made in 2016. And the damage is not just large, it is uneven and strategically corrosive. The hardest blow was felt by the companies most deeply integrated into European supply chains, precisely the most productive exporters that have historically driven the national growth. By making life intolerably complicated for the most successful firms, the country weakened the very sectors that should have been pulling the economy forward in a globalized world. For a few years after the referendum, the true impact was hidden because trade continued under old rules. But the real structural breakage came when the Trade and Cooperation Agreement took full effect, imposing friction, paperwork, and delay where once there was seamless trade. And the result is clear. Over the decade, the UK's performance has dropped, its growth has lagged, and its living standards have stagnated. And the UK's per capita GDP growth is now estimated to be between 6 and 10% less than its comparable advanced economic peers, landing it around 10th place among those nations. And the political class has tried to spin this as a mere period of temporary adjustment. But the authors of the new report warn that what was once only a temporary hiccup has evolved into a structural change that continues to undermine the entire economy. And it's not a moment of crisis, it's a chronic condition fueled by long-term political inconsistency and weakened business confidence. And we are now seeing the results in real time right up to the end of 2025. The overall economic momentum is clearly stalling. The latest GDP data shows an unexpected contraction of 0.1% in September, with quarterly growth down to a fragile 0.1%. And this paints the picture of an economy that started the year strong, but is now visibly losing steam as the crucial year-end budget came in. And the old question is back. Is Britain losing its economic momentum once again? And factors like high credit costs, expensive energy, and global conflicts, of course, with Ukraine and Gaza driving up freight and insurance, they all contribute, of course. But they combine lethally with the Brexit bureaucracy and political uncertainty that uniquely dampens UK investment. And even the shrinkage in September's industrial output was partly due to a cyber attack that temporarily halted Jaguar Land Rover, a microcosm of the multiple vulnerabilities facing UK industry. The manufacturing sector is retreating, and even the traditionally resilient services sector has been revised downwards. And the business climate, already fragile, is crumbling. And this is why the deeply uncomfortable term "sick man of Europe" is once again echoing in the corridors of Westminster and the City of London. This is a label with a long, inglorious history, last applied to the UK in the 1970s. Supporters of this harsh label point to multiple worrying signals. Quarter-by-quarter slowdown in GDP growth, a rise in the unemployment rate to 5%, subdued business investment due to persistent high costs and political uncertainty. And financial analysts are clear. If you adjust the recent growth figures for population increase, the economy was practically standing still over the summer. It's far removed from the strong start earlier in the year, which many companies accelerated specifically to get ahead of potential US tariffs imposed by the new administration. And that's a clear sign that businesses are operating in a state of fear and contingency and not growth and confidence. And this crisis of confidence is now the central political challenge for the current Labour government. Chancellor Rachel Reeves faces her most delicate test with her autumn budget this year. And the performance, well, she has to perform an impossible political tightrope walk. Balance fiscal prudence with a desperate need to stimulate growth. But so far, well, governments have failed this equation for decades, and the position is made infinitely harder by the structural constraints of Brexit. But her job was to revive the mission for economic growth while simultaneously being forced to extract billions more from the people through tax hikes because the economic base has shrunk so dramatically. And this necessity to break manifesto promises while dampening public spending is the toxic legacy of the decision made 10 years ago. The constant threat of additional tax hikes and the persistent rumors about targeting employer contribution to pension plans were stifling the fragile business climate once more. And as one analyst warned, uncertainty over taxes threatens to choke the fragile business climate and push unemployment significantly higher. Growth was sold as the panacea to all the country's woes, but the arithmetic never added up, and now the government is left managing the consequences of that fantasy. Of course, some resilience remains. The label "sick man" might be overwrought if you compare the UK to Germany, which is barely growing, or Italy, which is stagnating. It's homemade as well. I mean, the UK's decision was homemade too, but that in Germany is homemade as well, and in Italy, quite sure about that too. But the UK's unemployment rate remains below the Eurozone average, and inflation, which was once the highest in the G7, has fallen a bit faster, but still. The City of London stock market is showing some strength, partly thanks to falling gilt yields and the prospect of an interest rate cut. But these are technical corrections, not signs of fundamental self-sustaining growth. And the core message remains from the experts. The UK needs to shake itself up. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor must be ready to explain and deliver unpopular decisions if they want to avoid more months of negative growth. And the only way to escape this sick man label is to reignite corporate confidence and find a sustainable course between caution and stimulus. And here's the tragedy. This time around, unlike the 70s, the country has fewer reserves to weather the storm. The decade-long erosion of investment productivity and trade, directly traceable to the decision to leave the EU, has left the UK exposed, lagging its peers, and grappling with a self-inflicted structural challenge that will define its economy for the foreseeable future.